A few months ago, I made a video outlining how much my car sharing fleet makes, and in that video, I spoke about how my fleet makes on average up to about 18 grand per month, and my expenses can be anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 per month. And that video performed really well, and it got a lot more views than a typical video of mine. And like any video that is blessed by the YouTube algorithm, there is bound to be a lot of, well, haters. Or at the very least, people who doubt your numbers and don't really understand the truth behind running a car sharing business and the actual profit and expenses that go into that. And as a result, in that video, I had a lot of people who were telling me that once you take into account my expenses, my taxes, my depreciation, and the time of both myself as well as HP, we aren't making much more than a minimum wage McDonald's worker. And to me, this type of comment and this realm of thinking, which I actually hear quite often here on YouTube, tells me one of two things. Either number one, this person has never owned a business before and doesn't really understand how making money in a business really works. Or option number two, this person just really doesn't understand the business of car sharing. And so today we're actually going to be addressing this because I think there is a lot to be learned from this type of comment and with this line of thinking. And I do think that there are probably a lot of people who share this method of thinking and as a result have never considered getting into car sharing themselves. And as a result, they probably are missing out. So let's get started. So first, let me give you a little bit of context here. Now, I've been a car sharing host for 5 years. I have 3,000 trips on the Turo platform. I have 17 cars listed on Turo, 1 car listed on GetAround, and 2 RVs listed on Outdoorsy and RV Share. And we have 23 cars in total if you count our 3 personal cars. Car sharing is one of our 3 main sources of income. We have car sharing, we have social media, and then I also work in consulting. And as we sit here today in 2022, HP, my fiance and business partner, handles most of the day-to-day operations with the Turo fleet. He's the one who repairs the cars, maintains the cars, checks them in and out. But it actually wasn't until last year in the summer of 2021 where HP quit his job in order to manage our fleet full-time. That way I could instead concentrate on growing our social media following. So let's first address some of the assumptions that people have whenever you make money with car sharing. In that video that I just mentioned, as well as over the years, I've had a number of comments essentially saying something along the lines of, if you make $18,000 per month, you have $6,000 worth of expenses. That leaves you with $2,000. Then you have taxes, which is about 20%. Then depreciation, which is 8 to 10%. Then you have your time, and by the time you take all of this into account, you're making about $20 per hour. And you know, I actually understand where this line of thinking comes from, because on the absolute surface level, this seems like it would be accurate. But the thing is, it simply isn't. And I'm not only saying that this isn't accurate to my business, but I would argue it probably isn't accurate for most car sharing businesses. First, let's talk about cash flow versus expenses. So when you run a car sharing fleet, you have money coming in from a few different places. Number one, you have your daily trip rate and reimbursements. Number two, you have damage claims and total losses. And number three, you have whenever you sell the actual car, but more on that later. These 3 categories are for the most part where your revenue comes from. But what about expenses? Now, obviously, your expenses are going to cover things like oil, maintenance, repairs, trackers, insurance, things that you need to spend on a daily or monthly basis in order to keep your fleet operational. But there are some other expenses that you need to take into account as well. Expenses that you probably would have had regardless of whether you had a business or not. But because you have a business, a portion of those expenses now get to be categorized as a business expense because you're now using that for business purposes, and thus it's now tax deductible. Things like your phone, your internet, your computer, these are all expenses that at one point in time would have been solely personal expenses if you were a traditional W-2 employee, but because of the fact that you own a Turo fleet and you have a business, you can at least deduct a portion of that monthly bill. You can even go as far as to deduct a portion of your monthly home expenses as well. For example, HP and I have a home studio, a home office, and a home garage, which are solely dedicated to our businesses. And as a result, a portion of our home expenses gets to be deducted because they count as business expenses. Many times, some of these expenses are expenses that you would have had regardless. For example, I live in a 4-bedroom home. Whether or not I owned a business or not, I would probably still be living in this house. And the rooms that I currently use for business would just be sitting empty or they would be used as guest rooms. But because of the fact I'm able to utilize them for my business, I'm able to then save myself money during tax season. Many of these expenses are expenses that you would have regardless. You need to have a phone, you need to have a computer, you need to pay for internet. These are things that you need to have. And whether or not you own a business, you would have had to pay for these monthly or daily or yearly expenses. But because you utilize these expenses at least a portion of the time for business, you can deduct a portion of those expenses. This is where talking about having $6,000 worth of monthly expenses can sometimes be a little misleading, because mixed into that $6,000 are things like a portion of my electricity bill, a portion of my gas bill, a portion of my internet bill, a portion of buying a new phone or a new laptop. Basically, any expense that I'm buying that is being used for business, a portion of that, if not the entire thing, is being deducted on my taxes and is being counted as a monthly expense. And this can in some ways be a huge advantage to running and owning a business, including a car sharing fleet. Next, let's talk about the topic of depreciation, because this is absolutely one of the more hotly debated topics whenever you talk about car sharing, especially whenever we're talking about profit that you make when car sharing. Depreciation is absolutely an issue when you run a car sharing fleet, but how big of an issue depends on the types of cars that you rent out. And this is why for the last 2.5 years of being on YouTube, I have repeatedly preached that buying at the lowest point in the depreciation curve is incredibly important. And that's what's going to protect you from excessive depreciation. Whenever you buy a car at the bottom of the depreciation curve, you're able to buy that car after it's had the bulk of its depreciation. This means that the depreciation that you'll have to absorb as the second or third owner of that vehicle will be extremely limited. And because of the fact that I almost exclusively buy my cars at the lowest point in the depreciation curve, depreciation really isn't much of an issue at all with my business and with my profit. I have never lost money when selling a car or whenever one of my vehicles gets totaled. Every single time I've been able to own a car for a few years, rent out that car on Turo, make money while owning the vehicle, and then sell that car and either break even or make money on that sale. And the same applies for total losses as well. If you buy cars at the right price, depreciation just isn't much of an issue at all. And though I definitely think that as the car market is shifting and decreasing, it will become more of an issue, especially for those hosts that have overpaid for cars, I still think that if you're buying at the bottom of the depreciation curve, you are protecting yourself from these excessive losses. Even before the car market exploded back in 2021, I was still able to break even or make a profit off of sales and total losses. And I definitely plan to continue doing this moving forward. And as the car market continues to shift and change, the ability to not have any depreciation probably will be limited, but you'll still be able to offset that depreciation by buying at the bottom of the depreciation curve. But also keep in mind that though depreciation is something that can be a revenue killer, it can also be a huge benefit whenever it comes to tax season. And it's actually something that you should embrace in some context. And this brings me to my next point, which is taxes. Whenever you run any business, car sharing included, your tax deductions aren't just limited to your physical expenses. You, of course, have the money that you spend each and every month on your fleet, so oil, maintenance, tires, repairs, and tools. But there are also a lot of other rooms for deductions and expenses as well. For example, like I mentioned earlier, a portion of your home expenses can be taken into account come tax season if you use your home for work. You can also have depreciation, which is a huge tax benefit. And in the realm of car sharing, there's a lot of room for depreciation with your fleet, from bonus depreciation to Section 179. There is a lot of opportunity to lower your tax bill. Or you can also do things like donate to charity, which is something that is tax deductible and something that I've started to do more and more as I've made more money. Because at the end of the day, I would rather have my money go to an organization or a charity that I'm passionate about than have it go directly to the government. There are a lot of ways to legally and legitimately lower your tax bill, and though of course you should have 20 to 30% of your income set aside come tax season, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to have to pay 20 to 30%. Which is why I talk so much on my channel and in my videos about getting a great accountant that knows the ins and outs of car sharing and how you can use things like charitable donations, reinvesting back into your business, and standard deductions and expenses in order to lower that tax bill. The point I'm trying to make in this video is that when I see comments, not just on my videos, but on any video by any creator pointing out why revenue or profit numbers aren't accurate because of cookie cutter figures, things like depreciation, taxes, and your hourly rate, it really tells me one of two things. It tells me that a person really doesn't understand how money works when owning a business, or it tells me that a person just has never owned a business. And at the end of the day, starting a side hustle or starting a business isn't necessarily all about making your equivalent rate that you would make at a part-time job. No one with a successful business started that business while simultaneously calculating their hourly rate and saying, well, I'm only making $25 per hour with this gig. I may as well go get a job in an office or in retail. The truth is, many businesses go a very long time before they're able to pay their owners a good salary, and there are even more businesses that never get to that point at all. But truthfully, if you were to tell me that I could do exactly what I'm doing today, and I would only make $20 per hour, or I could go get a corporate job, work 40 hours per week, and make the same amount of money, I would choose what I'm doing today all day long. And I think that most people that own a business or dream of owning their own business probably have the same line of thinking as well. And the thing is, car sharing can be extremely lucrative. And this line of thinking where you're calculating your hourly rate and coming up with the conclusion that somebody is only making $20 per hour, well, then you are missing out on a lot of potential profit. But even if our car sharing fleet did make only $20 per hour, we would probably still do it, at least for the time being, until we found something more lucrative. This thought process is what keeps people from starting their own business, from starting their own side hustle, from leaving their corporate or 9-to-5 job to go start something on their own. And honestly, I think that this line of thinking is incredibly toxic to your overall financial and professional progress. And though this video here really concentrated on this line of thinking in the context of car sharing, it is absolutely applicable to any business or side hustle you're wanting to start. But with that being said, you guys, I wanted to make this video because I think that it's really easy for me to talk about how much my fleet is bringing in, how much it's costing me each and every month. But at the end of the day, that is just a small portion of the overall picture. And it doesn't really cover the entire financial situation that my car sharing fleet is in. And I hope that this video gave you a little bit more context and a little bit more insight into how running a car sharing fleet actually works from a financial standpoint. If you guys have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it. So make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I'll see you guys in the next video.